Did you know that more than 100 rock legends have died with secret love letters still hidden in drawers, hotel safes, and stage cases, never meant for the world to see? From pop megastars who loved in silence to metal gods who left no trace but a final note. Here are 20 rock and roll legends who kept a secret lover until the day they died. 1. Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston. Michael Jackson, the most famous pop singer in the world, had something he never told his fans. It wasn't about dancing or singing. It was about love. A deep, private love. In the early 1990s, when everything in his career was huge and bright, he quietly shared something special with another star, Whitney Houston. She was also at the top. Her voice could fill stadiums, but her heart found peace with Michael. They didn't show this to the world. They stayed hidden. They spent quiet time at Neverland Ranch, away from crowds, away from the cameras. People close to them later said they were serious. They talked about marriage. They wanted a quiet life together, away from fame. This wasn't just a rumor, it was a real connection. It stayed secret while they were alive. Only after both of them were gone did the truth begin to rise. Friends and people who worked with them spoke about what they had seen. This wasn't a quick love. This wasn't just a moment. It was deep, strong, but it had to stay in the dark. Maybe they were scared the world wouldn't accept it. Maybe they wanted to protect it. The world only saw their stage life, their fame, their pain. 2. Elvis Presley and Joyce Bova. When people talk about Elvis Presley, they always mention Priscilla. But that's not the whole truth. There was someone else who loved him deeply. Her name was Joyce Bova. She didn't sing, she didn't act. She worked in politics, far from flashing lights. But for years, she and Elvis shared something secret. Their time together started while he was still with Priscilla. They kept it quiet. It wasn't about show, it was about peace. Joyce later said they wanted to have a child. They dreamed about a quiet home, far from stress, but it didn't happen. Their love stayed silent, hidden. After Elvis was gone in 1977, she finally told her story. By then, it was too late for him to explain, too late for both sides. But her words made people think. Why didn't he share this love with the world? Maybe he was tired. Maybe he needed someone who saw the real him. Behind the gold suits and screaming fans, Elvis was just a man looking for calm. Joyce gave him that. Their love wasn't fake, it was just private. And that makes it even more real. 3. Prince and Susanna Melvoin. Prince was loud on stage, colors, sound, and mystery. But when it came to his heart, he closed the door. In the 1980s, he fell in love with Susanna Melvoin. She was more than a singer. She was part of his soul. They were close, even engaged, but they didn't tell the world. They kept their love in the shadows. Prince wrote songs with her in mind. Some were about joy, others about heartbreak. She was in the music, hidden in every beat. Even after they parted ways, she stayed close. He trusted her. When Prince passed in 2016, people looked back. They saw the signs. The truth had always been there, in lyrics, in silence, in his eyes. Their story wasn't on magazine covers, but it was strong. It didn't need noise. Maybe Prince wanted to protect what they had. Maybe he feared the world would break it. Their love wasn't for the cameras. It was real in a world where so much is fake. Their story tells us love can be quiet, yet powerful. 4. Freddie Mercury and the Munich hairdresser. Freddie Mercury sang like a storm and lived like a fire. But behind the stage, he had a heart that wanted peace. In the early 1980s, he stayed in Germany. That's where he met someone who made him feel safe. A hairdresser from Munich. This person wasn't famous, but Freddie kept them close. They spent time together while he worked in the studio. They didn't walk red carpets. They didn't take photos. They just lived small, quiet moments. people who worked with him noticed the change. Freddie laughed more. He smiled. He looked free. This love came before the one the world later knew, but that doesn't make it less important. He didn't write songs about it. He didn't talk about it in interviews. Maybe he didn't want the media to ruin it. Maybe he wanted to protect someone who gave him peace. Only after he passed did others speak. They remembered the smiles, the care, the late-night talks. It was real. This story is not about stage lights. It's not about fame. It's about a person who helped Freddie feel like himself. And that matters. These hidden stories all show the same thing. Behind the awards, money, and huge shows were people trying to hold on to something real, but not the kind that goes on TV. The kind that lives in quiet places. The kind that stays even when no one is watching. 5. David Bowie and Dana Gillespie. David Bowie was a star with a wild look and a mind full of songs. But behind the bright lights, there was someone always nearby, Dana Gillespie. Most people didn't know how close they were. She wasn't just a singer he helped. She wasn't just someone he wrote music for. She was someone he stayed with, again and again, when no one was looking. They didn't take pictures together in public. They didn't talk about what they were doing. But people who were around back then knew. They saw it. They felt it. Bowie and Dana would leave town together and disappear for weeks. No press, no cameras, just the two of them. In the 1970s, Bowie was becoming a big name. He had fans everywhere. But during all that, Dana was with him, in the background, helping, waiting, loving. Some of their friends said later that they were more than close. They were lovers. It wasn't for show. It wasn't to make headlines. They had a real thing, a private thing. She didn't ask for fame from it. She didn't use his name to rise. She was just always there. And for years, they kept it hidden from the world. 6. John Lennon and May Pang. May Pang started as just someone who worked for John Lennon. She answered phones. She ran errands. She wasn't famous. But then something changed. John and Yoko Ono were having problems. They needed space. And during that time, John turned to May. Not in front of the public, not in the newspapers, but at home, quietly. Suddenly, May wasn't just the assistant. She was the person who shared his house, his thoughts, his life. For 18 months, they lived together. They laughed, traveled, made memories. And John made a lot of music. He once said it was one of the best times in his life for writing songs. Still, they kept it quiet. Yoko may have known. She may have even agreed to it behind closed doors. But the public didn't. May didn't tell people. She didn't write about it right away. She held on to the story until long after John was gone. There were no magazine stories, no red carpet pictures. It was all in the shadows. But it was real as any other part of his life. Jimi Hendrix and Lithophane Pridgan. Before Jimi Hendrix was a name the world knew, before the noise, the lights, the fans screaming his name, there was Faye. Her full name was Lithophane Pridgan, but everyone called her Faye. She was different. She wasn't there for the fame. She was there before the fame, when Hendrix was poor, when he played tiny shows, when he didn't know where he'd sleep next. Faye was there. She gave him a place to stay. She gave him food. She believed in him when most people didn't. While other women came and went once Hendrix became famous, Faye stayed quiet. She didn't talk to the press. She didn't even ask for anything. And yet, she was always in his heart. She saw the part of him that wasn't a star. She saw the man who was still trying to make it. After Hendrix was gone, Faye finally spoke. She said their bond was deep. It was real. She said she had to stay quiet because the world wouldn't understand. While the world looked at Hendrix as a wild man, Faye remembered the one who sat with her on the floor, playing guitar, hoping for a break. Their time together was hidden, but it lasted longer than anyone thought. She stayed out of the spotlight because she never wanted anything but him. 8. Amy Winehouse and Pete Doherty. Amy Winehouse lived a life that everyone watched. The world knew her name. They knew her songs. They knew her troubles. Paparazzi followed her down the street. Her relationships were always in the news. But one relationship stayed in the dark. Pete Doherty. He had his own hard path. He sang in a band, and he got in trouble often. His name was often linked with bad choices and wrong turns. But with Amy, there was something else. Something quiet. Something hidden. While the world was busy talking about Amy and her other partners, she and Pete were sharing something real. They didn't go to big parties together. They didn't pose for photos. They just spent time with each other when the cameras weren't around. After Amy passed away, Pete finally spoke. He said she was the most important woman in his life. That didn't come from nowhere. That came from something deep, but they kept it quiet. Maybe they knew people would never understand. Maybe it was just too personal. They were both dealing with pain, both trying to survive. They leaned on each other when no one else could see. Pete didn't try to make it into a show. He just said what he felt. And their story, one of love and hurt and silence, stayed in the shadows until it was too late to ask questions. 9. Roy Orbison and the Unnamed Lover. Roy Orbison sang songs that made people cry. His music was full of loss and pain. After his wife Claudette passed away in a crash, the world thought Roy was all alone. But that was not the truth. Behind the sadness, something was hidden. Roy had a woman, a secret woman. No one knew her name. No one saw her at shows. She didn't go on red carpets. She stayed in the shadows. Yet she was always there, always close. For years, Roy kept her out of the spotlight. Not even his bandmates knew. He wrote letters to her. He wrote about her in his journals. They talked about their dreams, their hopes, and their feelings. After Roy was gone in 1988, these letters were found. People were shocked. The love was deep. The love was strong. It had lasted for many years. She had been with him quietly. Through the grief, through the tours, through the lonely hotel nights, she stayed. And no one knew. Fans never saw her. Reporters never asked about her. Even close friends were clueless. Roy kept her locked away in his heart. This woman, whose name we still do not know, was his peace in a storm. While others saw a man broken by sorrow, he was holding on to something soft and true, and he never told a soul. 10. Chuck Berry and the French Woman. Chuck Berry rocked the world. His music had fire. His steps were fast. He moved crowds. But his final years were slower, quieter. And during that quiet, he found her. A young woman from France. No one knew her face. No one knew her name. She was never on stage. She was never on the news. But she was there. Chuck met her during a trip to Europe. Something clicked. She came to see him. She traveled across the ocean to visit him in Missouri. Many times, she stayed with him when he was old. She sat beside him when the world stopped calling. No cameras, no stories. She was like a ghost, always near, but never seen. People in his small circle noticed. They said Chuck smiled more when she was near. He sat back more. He didn't need to prove anything. She made him feel safe, calm. She brought joy, but he never talked about her. He never shared her with the world. She stayed in the background, quiet and loyal. 11. Mark Bolan and Gloria Jones. Mark Bolan lit up the stage with glitter and wild hair. His songs were loud. His clothes were bright. He was married. People thought they knew his story. But behind the lights, something else was happening. Something quiet. Something real. He met Gloria Jones, a singer with her own path. They started something, but it wasn't for the world to see. They hid it. Even after they had a child together, they kept it low. They lived together, but not in the spotlight. No magazines followed them. No big stories were written. It was real, but it was private. Years passed. Fans didn't know. Reporters didn't ask. It was a home full of music, but it stayed off the radar. Then came the crash. In 1977, Mark was gone. Gloria was with him. She had been driving. That's when the truth came out. People saw their bond. People saw their life. It wasn't fake. It wasn't short. They had built a life together, one that was never shown on stage. Gloria stayed strong after the accident. She kept their child safe. She carried the story alone. The world had missed it all. The true love of Mark Bolan's life wasn't the one people expected. She was the one who had been there all along. 12. George Harrison and Kathy Etchingham. George Harrison was known as the quiet one in the Beatles. He was married to Pattie Boyd. They were the couple people talked about. Photos, headlines, magazine covers. But before Pattie, there was Kathy Etchingham, and she never went away. Kathy knew George before the fame, before the screaming fans, before the lights. They met when he was just starting out. Their bond was strong. They laughed. They shared time. She knew the real him, not the one on stage. Even after he married Pattie, George kept in touch with Kathy. Their story didn't end. Kathy stayed far from fame. She didn't want to be known. She didn't want interviews. While George flew around the world, Kathy stayed in the background. But their bond stayed steady. She was part of his world, even if no one saw it. Years later, when the noise faded, she spoke. Just a little. Just enough to let people know. George had loved her for years. Even while fans followed other stories, Kathy was there, hidden, quiet, real. She didn't try to take credit. She didn't rewrite history. She just told her truth. She had been part of his life, from the start, through the fame, through the change. She stayed in the background, but the bond never left. 13. Johnny Cash and Billie Jean Horton. Johnny Cash and June Carter looked like a dream team. Everyone knew their love story. They sang together, laughed together, and stayed married until the end. But there was someone else in Johnny's heart, someone most people never heard about. Her name was Billie Jean Horton. She was the widow of Hank Williams, another music legend. Before June, before the bright lights and cameras, Billie Jean had a deep hold on Johnny. Their secret started early and never fully ended. Billie Jean wasn't just another name in the past. She meant something big to Johnny. When he was still young in the music world, she stood by him. She helped shape him. She was close when he was becoming the man everyone would know. Their connection was private, but strong. While the world saw June as the love of his life, Billie Jean never really left the picture. Their story was kept quiet, behind closed doors, far from flashing lights. Even as Johnny grew older and more famous, Billie Jean stayed in the background. They never spoke about it. No interviews, no books, no photos. But people close to them said she never stopped being a part of his life. She stayed close, quietly watching as he built a life with someone else. It was a second love story, hidden in plain sight. She wasn't chasing fame. She just cared. And Johnny never turned away from that connection. It stayed with him for life. 14. Tom Petty and the Hidden Companion. Tom Petty had a strong voice, a big name, and a full life on paper. But there was a part of his world no one really saw. Not even fans who followed every album or every concert. In his later years, when he was tired and not feeling well, there was someone always around, a woman. She stayed out of the spotlight. No one knew her name. She was never shown in magazines. No red carpet, no public kisses. But she was always there. This woman wasn't part of the music business. She didn't want attention. She didn't even want to be known. What mattered was her closeness to Tom. People who spent time with him said she was kind, patient, and calm. She helped him when things got tough. When his body was in pain and his mind was full of worry, she gave him comfort. She didn't need to be seen. She didn't ask for anything. She just stayed. During his final days, she was right there, always. Taking care of him, making sure he wasn't alone. She never left. Some said her quiet love meant more than anyone could understand. After he passed, stories started to come out. Friends mentioned the woman in the background. Not a fan, not a helper, a real part of his life. And yet the world never knew her name. Just a hidden person who held a broken star together in his last hours. 15. Greg Allman and the European Partner. Greg Allman was known for his wild days and loud nights. He had many girlfriends. Many people thought they knew everything about him. He was in the news a lot, on stage, off stage, always seen. But later in life, things changed. He slowed down. And a quiet woman from Europe entered the picture. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't go to parties. She kept herself away from the noise. But she stayed close to Greg when he needed someone the most. Their time together was private. No one really knew how long they were a couple, but she was there. She was part of his home life. She wasn't looking for attention. She wasn't part of the show. When he got sick, when the days got harder, she became the one he trusted. She made sure he ate, rested, and felt peace. Others noticed her quiet strength. She brought calm to a man who once lived like a storm. After he passed away in 2017, people started asking questions. Who was this woman? Why had no one seen her before? Family members quietly said she had been part of his life for years. They said she gave him more than comfort. She gave him the feeling that everything would be okay. Greg had been through so much: fame, mistakes, loss. But near the end, he found someone who made all that hurt feel smaller, a partner the world never saw. 16. Lane Staley and Demry Parrott. Lane Staley wasn't just the haunting voice behind Alice in Chains. He was the pain in the music. His lyrics bled sorrow, his voice cracked with truth, and his eyes often looked somewhere far away. But if there was one place that ever truly felt like home for Lane, it was in the presence of Demry Parrott. Demry wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his muse, his soulmate, and the only person who seemed to understand the quiet agony behind his fame. While the world saw Lane as a tortured genius wrapped in flannel and darkness, Demry saw the gentle artist who still believed in love, who laughed at silly things, and who clung to beauty even in the midst of chaos. Together, they weren't rock stars or addicts. They were just two broken souls trying to keep each other warm in a world that often felt too cold. Their relationship was raw, unpredictable, and deeply passionate. They shared everything, from poetic nights filled with laughter and records to long stretches of silence weighed down by the heavy fog of substance abuse. They tried to heal each other, but addiction isn't easily beaten, especially when it becomes part of your love story. Over time, Demry's health began to fail. Years of drug use had taken a toll. She passed away in 1996 from complications related to her addiction, and for Lane, that moment shattered whatever was left of him. After Demry died, Lane didn't just grieve, he disappeared. He retreated into the shadows of his Seattle apartment, refusing to see friends, refusing to make music, refusing to live. Those close to him said it was like watching a light slowly fade. Her photographs stayed on his walls. Her letters remained untouched. Her clothes, her perfume, little pieces of her soul. He kept them all like relics of a sacred past. He never replaced her. He never tried. Over the next few years, Lane's voice grew quiet. He rarely left his home. The man who once screamed through speakers now barely whispered through phone calls. On April 5, 2002, Lane Staley was found dead in his apartment. He had been gone for days. The official cause was a speedball overdose, but those who knew him would tell you the real cause was heartbreak. Demery had gone first, and Lane, piece by piece, followed her into the dark. 17. Cliff Burton and the Secret Fiancé. Cliff Burton was more than Metallica's bassist. He was the soul of the band in its early years, a wild-haired wizard who treated the bass like a weapon of thunder. He played with the kind of passion that made people stop and stare, even if they didn't know a single thing about music. But offstage, Cliff was calm, introspective, and surprisingly gentle. What many fans didn't know, what almost no one outside his inner circle knew, was that Cliff was in love, deeply, secretly, and genuinely. Somewhere in the background of his wild touring life was a woman who had captured his heart. She wasn't famous. She wasn't chasing the spotlight. In fact, she stayed far away from the noise and the chaos of the music industry. She was private, quiet, and deeply supportive. Cliff loved that about her. She was his escape from the madness, his anchor. They had talked about a future, maybe a cabin up north, maybe a place by the lake, something away from tour buses and recording studios. He even picked out a ring, something simple but meaningful, something that said, "You're it for me." Cliff told friends that once the tour was over, once life slowed down, he was going to propose. It was going to be a new chapter. But that chapter never came. On the morning of September 27, 1986, tragedy struck. Metallica's tour bus lost control on a cold Swedish road. Cliff was thrown through the window as the bus flipped. The young bassist, just 24 years old, died instantly. The world mourned. Metallica was shattered. But there was someone else, someone who cried alone, away from the cameras, away from the headlines. His secret fiancée vanished from the public eye. She never gave interviews. She never showed up at concerts. She never told her side of the story. Her grief was quiet, sacred. Some say she returned to her hometown. Others believe she remained a silent presence in the background, close to the band in spirit, if not in sight. But Cliff's friends confirmed she was real. They saw her, they knew her, and they knew how much Cliff had loved her. It's one of those tragic love stories that never gets a final act. No wedding, no vows, just memories left behind in a hotel room, a ring that was never given, and a love that the world never got to see. 18. Ronnie Van Zant and the Mississippi Woman. Ronnie Van Zant stood on stage like he owned it. He sang for Lynyrd Skynyrd and moved like he had fire in his bones. But when the lights turned off, he wasn't just the tough leader everyone saw. Behind closed doors, Ronnie had someone else, a woman. She lived in Mississippi. She was not his wife, but she was real, and she stayed in his life until the end. During tours, he would visit her. Not often, but enough. The crew knew. Some friends talked. She never came to shows. She never talked to magazines. She stayed out of sight. Ronnie liked it that way. Maybe he didn't want to explain. Maybe he couldn't. It wasn't easy. He had a wife, a family, and fans watching every step. But he kept going back to her. People noticed when he left suddenly or made last-minute stops. Every time it was Mississippi. Every time it was her. In 1977, the plane went down. Ronnie was eliminated with others on board. After that, she vanished. No interviews, no books, not even a name. But the people close to him remembered. They remembered the way he talked about her when he thought no one was listening. They remembered the softer side he tried to hide. She gave him peace. In a life full of loud music, wild nights, and fast living, she was the quiet in his storm. She never asked for anything. And when he was gone, She didn't ask for fame. She kept what they had to herself. Maybe that's how Ronnie would have wanted it. 19. Warren Zevon and the Silent Muse. Warren Zevon wrote songs that were sharp, like knives. He had a voice that made people stop and listen. But what they didn't know was that behind the music, behind the tough words, there was someone else. A woman. She was not famous. She was not part of the music world. But she was close to Warren's heart. She never showed her face in public. She never gave a story. But she was there. Warren never said her name, but in his last songs, people could feel her. He began writing differently, less about wild things, more about love, loss, and holding on to something you can't keep. Friends said he would write in small notebooks about her. He never showed the pages, but they found them later. The words told of someone he missed, someone who made him better. She didn't leave marks in the news, but she left marks in his music. And in the end, that was all he had left. Some say she came back when he got sick. Quiet visits. No one knew. Others think she stayed far away, but stayed in his thoughts. Either way, she became his muse. A silent one. The kind you don't see, but feel in every word. Warren didn't shout her name. He let her live in the lines of his final songs. And now, every time those songs play, she's there. 20. Rory Gallagher and the Anonymous Irish Woman. Rory Gallagher was one of the best blues guitar players ever, but he didn't live like a rock star. He didn't care about fame. He played because he loved it. He didn't like interviews. He didn't talk much about his private life, and because of that, most people didn't know he had someone special. A woman. She lived in Ireland. She was his, and no one knew. Friends said they were close for years. She didn't go to concerts. She didn't travel with the band. She didn't want to be seen. But Rory loved her. He would visit her in quiet places. No bodyguards, no pictures. Just the two of them. She stayed out of the spotlight, and Rory respected that. He liked that their time was just for them. No cameras, no fans. Just quiet love. When Rory got sick, she didn't appear, not even when he passed in 1995. But after, people close to him began to talk. They said she was real. They said she had been his calm place. In a life filled with noise, she was the silence he needed, and she never wanted the world to know. She had him, and that was enough. No one wrote her name, no one took her photo, but she was there, behind the songs, behind the long tours, behind the man who gave everything to music.